let me introduce the talk I'm going to give you is the companies we keep. And as alluded to, it's based around a project that I was part of with DataKind and an anti-corruption NGO called Global Witness. And fundamentally, the goal was, can we look at UK corporate ownership data and extract anything meaningful out of it that facilitates looking for shady behavior. What I'm going to try and do is give you a quick introduction to who I am, so you have some clue as to why I've been invited, why maybe I have the things I have to say have something behind them. For those of you who aren't so familiar with DataKind, I want to give an introduction to the organization as well, because I think for anybody working in this space, and certainly in social good and data for social good, DataKind does a lot of amazing stuff. And then I'll get into the actual project and the problem that we were tackling, look into some of the complexity and complications. I'm wondering whether I've actually got the right deck up. A second, hang on one second, because I'm just, yeah, no, this is the right deck, sorry. Confused myself, I made some corrections. So I'll get into some of the complexity in the calculations and what we were tackling, what was the solution we built, and then actually some of the impact as well. So you're not just going to see code, you're going to see some coding, you're going to see some of the technical approach, but you're going to get to, you know, what did this achieve, what did this do? So first up, who am I? It's always good to know why this person is talking to you about something. So as mentioned, so I'm a lead data scientist at HAL24K. We're a smart city, smart infrastructure company based out of Amsterdam. I've been with the company since its earliest days. I was the first data science hire. So now I'm there with a team of about nine or 10 data scientists building these solutions. Equally, I'm also a recovering astrophysicist. My first career was as a professional researcher. I got my PhD back in 2006, and then I actually worked as a researcher in international labs and universities around the world for about 10 years. And one of the links I have back to the university at the moment is I'm currently in my final year as a Royal Society entrepreneur in residence. So I've been trying to bring back a load of that data science industrial knowledge that I've had back into an academic environment to stimulate new ways of them tackling their science, as well as hopefully giving some tools and some advice on those who wish to transition out of academia, whether to start their own business or to do other things. As will be evident today, I'm a long-term DataKind volunteer, both at their smaller events, their bigger projects, one of which we'll talk about today, as well as serving on the committee. And just generally about me, if you want to hear more about my ramblings, you can either follow me on Twitter or you can look at old blog posts and stuff like that. So that's me. But who are DataKind? So if you've not heard of DataKind, DataKind UK is the UK chapter, an independent charity in its own right from the parent DataKind organization, but a charity that builds data science capacity in social change organizations. And it does this through the help of its huge group of pro bono volunteer data scientists. And what you can see there is us. This is the survivor selfie from 4 of their data dive events. So these are kind of like the weekend hackathon style events. So if you've managed to make it to 9-10 p.m. on the Saturday night, you get to star in one of these photos. So it's a large community, like I say, of data scientists from all backgrounds and all industries and all experience levels. You've got those people who are only starting out, those who can code a neural network with one eye closed and one arm tied behind their back, as it were. And the idea is to bring them together with a load of different charities. And what you can see here on this deck is just a smattering of the logos of different organizations that have been part of DataKind UK projects. This isn't even DataKind International. This is just DataKind UK in the last 7 years, I think they've been going now. And you can see it's everything from large international charities like Amnesty International through to places like the Welcome Centre, which is a regional food bank just around Huddersfield. So, you know, not very big at all. Shelter, homelessness charity, national charity sort of thing. So like I say, it's all levels and all scales, and some of them are there for the weekend hackathon style events, and so they're just getting started out in their journey. Some of them like Global Witness, who we'll be talking about today, or I think the One campaign. I've been involved in some of the bigger, longer term projects. And so what this was about was I was asked to participate as a data ambassador on what's called a data core project. And a data core project with DataKind is a partnership with a third sector organization, so charity or an NGO, a social change organization. And it's going to take 6 to 12 months of a team of somewhere probably from 4 to 6 volunteers spending on average 4 hours a week of their time contributing to a pretty well-defined project. Because if you're going to spend that much time on it, you've got to know what you're trying to actually build. It's less exploratory and more of, we know we can actually do something here and we can deliver something at the end. The hackathons, the data dives, they tend to be a bit more, can we answer this question? Here's some data, let's get started on things. This is a much more coherent, larger body of work with a focused skill set. So the data ambassadors who are asked to be part of it have been screened and have been sort of interviewed to see, well, where is your expertise? What knowledge do you have? But it's still open to anybody to apply and for anybody to get involved in. Now, as much as I'm presenting on this work, and I'm very proud of it, and I did do a lot of work on it, I wasn't doing it in isolation, so credit where credit's due. We did this piece of work as a team of about 4 DataKind UK volunteers. So you've got Robin, Giselle, Heiko, and myself. You can see pre-beard, pre-pandemic beard. And then we had Sam Leon, who was the representative from Global Witness, who was the NGO liaison, but who was also getting his hands on data. He was getting the organization started in many respects on its data journey. And so he actively participated in helping build the solution and is now fundamentally responsible for pretty much maintaining it and developing it as it's now embedded inside of their organization. So that's all of them. If you do get involved with DataKind anyway, something you may end up very quickly discovering is Giselle, who I believe will be speaking to you at some point in the future, if she hasn't already, is actually now the executive director of DataKind, but she started out as a volunteer and now she's running the whole show in the UK. So the project question, and here you can see us all talking amongst ourselves as we try and figure out how we're going to solve this, is fundamentally, how can you better spot corruption and economic crime, especially when it's hidden by anonymous companies? Now, as I've kind of alluded to, Global Witness is an anti-corruption organization. And so they've been looking at, is there strip mining going on in third world countries or exploitation of workers, that sort of thing. And in their long history of doing investigative journalism and campaigning and chasing on these things, they know that the way you basically find out who's responsible is you need to follow the money. The problem is when you try to follow the money, you often encounter what are called anonymous companies. Now, I have a feeling that the audio isn't going to play on this because I don't think I've necessarily got settings to do so. So hang on one second if I can just check. I don't know if I do. So I think I've got I might have the subtitles turned on. Yes. Fundamentally, the link is below. I was only going to show you a clip of it anyway, so you can always go and have a look yourselves. Companies and corporations kind of exist as legal entities in our world, and a lot of us don't really take account of that. And that's all well and good, but some companies aren't really engaged directly in business. They are there as, shells. They are there as holding companies to hold other things. And as much as you can legitimately have those, you can also use these to hide who is really in control and who's owning things. And some people will do their very best to set up a chain of companies such that it's very hard to find out that they're the person in control of it. And this allows you to disguise your activities and where your money's going. I mean, at one of the simplest levels you can imagine, you do it such that you funnel earnings to a company hosted in a country where there effectively is minimal tax regulations. And so you can be hiding your tax revenues. And what Global Witness wanted to do is know, is there a way of breaking this down? Is there a way of getting into this data? Because these anonymous companies, they're used for all sorts of bad things. Things ranging from, as I've mentioned, tax evasion to diverting government resources to drug trafficking, conflict diamonds, all sorts of bad stuff goes on in the world, and it's facilitated in part by these anonymous company structures. So if you can break those open, perhaps you can actually sort of cut down on some of this stuff. Now, what happened back in 2015, 2016, was the UK government of the time did something that nobody else has done before it, in that it made a new requirement that all companies would be legally required to register who controls them. And when I say who, I mean people. So if you have more than 25% controlling stake in a company, and it's a UK company, that company is legally required to declare you as a controller, a person of significant control, also known as a beneficial owner. And these registers have existed before, but the other thing that the UK did was they made it an open register. So all of that data is publicly and freely available. So it's a legal requirement for you to file it, and it's easy for anybody to go and get it. All of you could now just go stop listening to me and go and start downloading this data if you wanted to. So this was really cool, and this was brand new. So when we were doing this project, it had only recently basically completed, that it had come out. One of the interesting things was that Companies House said, when asked about it, said, yeah, our data's clean, our data's perfect, there's nothing wrong with our data, you'll have no problems with our data. And we all inwardly chuckled. So one of the goals was, what problems can you identify with the data? What recommendations can we give back just in the management of this system? But also, we can actually look at how what this shows, because the only way you could, it is legitimate, actually, I should say, you can report a company as controlling your company, but only if that company is a UK registered company. Because if you follow that logic, you obviously have to ultimately get to a person. If you were saying, I'm Apple UK and I'm owned by Apple US, you still as the UK entity have a legal requirement to find out who any individuals are that control Apple US or further down that chain. So just because you are owned by an international company, that doesn't stop that requirement to kind of track it back to people. So, so that's great. So we can start looking at corporate control in the UK, and therefore we can start looking for red flags in places. And therefore this helps to trial data journalism effectively. And so can we use data science methodologies to plow into this to facilitate Global Witness's investigative team to actually go and start finding cool stuff and start finding nuggets of stories and exploitations and then tackle them. So those were our goals. I'm sure you'll agree, there's nothing really hard in all of that, is there? So what was our solution? What were we going to do? So at the simplest level, we are going to go to Companies House, and I've just done a screen dump in the top left corner, and you can see there's PSC data, persons of significant control. This data gets updated, I think, monthly now. You can get it as one giant batch file or single files. And as I've mentioned, there's a network of control here. So this naturally lends itself to a graphing approach and graph analytics and graph databases. So we're going to try and graph all of that data together, enrich it with some other data. So for example, the person's significant control data accounts for something like there's a little over 4 million active companies in the UK, an equivalent number of persons of significant control. You then got declared directors, and there's like 40 million of them. Then you've got lists of disqualified directors, people who aren't meant to be controlling companies, MPs and politicians around the world you might want to put in, places that have been labeled as being financial secrecy jurisdictions country-wise. Okay, well, if I can see something connected there. So you can start to see how you can maybe layer and connect all of those dots. And to do it, we ran on AWS in order to share some compute resources and be able to scale up and down when we needed something a bit heftier. A lot of the work was done in Python, certainly the work I was doing and the work Sam was doing. A little bit was done in R by one of the other analysts. Neo4j became the database back engine, and that was kind of I was responsible in all of this for building the graph. So on the technical side of the analytics, that's what you're going to see. And then there was Jupyter and Pandas and those other sorts of common tools that were being used to then query the data and pull the data and actually start getting inferences out. So that was the master plan. And a quick aside for anybody who doesn't know what a graph is, because if you're thinking a graph is, well, I get a y-axis and an x-axis and a y-axis, and I put my points on and I draw my line or my parabolic or whatever thing, you're thinking of the wrong thing. That's a figure. In the context of a graph, what I'm talking about is where I have a collection of nodes that are joined together by edges or relationships. So a classic example is something like a social network, where you would say Adam is a person and they have this relationship. They are friends with Jennifer, who's another person. So you've got this natural connection. Another example on this screen here is taken from the Twitter graph example, I think on the Neo4j page. You have people and they follow other users inside of on Twitter. You can imagine they could also, you could start putting connections in. This person has tweeted this person and they did it on this date with this message, and this person retweeted that. And then you start building up these layers of complexity. Another common place where you will have encountered graphs are in navigation and route finding. That's how you do a shortest path calculation, is you find a route from one node to another node through the possible edges and connections in that graph. So back to the question at hand. This is just another screenshot to show you some of the data you can get from Companies House. There's actually an API. You don't need to get things as a flat file. However, you're rate limited at a free level. So if you're trying to get all of the data, you're going to find that you're going to struggle, and you're either going to have to pay or it's going to take you a long time to get it. But you can access all of this data in a more structured format if you really want to, where you can start going in and querying updates. And in the context of if you were ever trying to build this in a maintained manner, maybe you'd want to go look this way. Or maybe you've just decided that you've got a lot of cache and you can go for a full unlimited API connection, then you can just pull it all down that way. But fundamentally, the data is the same. And if you're interested, like I say, go have a wander around Companies House. There's a lot of this data that's publicly available. And so this is the plan. And this is completely a mock-up. This is stolen from, if you like, an idea that could exist in the world of Spider-Man in the Marvel universe. The idea here is you can see that you have people in the pinky orange who have control of companies that are in blue. You can also see that we actually have here companies controlling companies. And you can also see that people are citizens of or resident in countries. And so the idea here is that you could imagine that, yay, I bought my Daily Bugle newspaper in New York City. Hey, it's controlled by J. Jenner Jameson, the big publisher, and he's resident in the UK. So all good, everybody's paying their taxes. But if you look a little deeper, you suddenly realize, well, actually, there's also a controlling interest in the parent Daily Bugle company, and it's controlled by another company, Oscorp, evil company controlled by villain Norman Osborn, and they're actually connected to these tax havens in the Cayman Islands and the BVI. And so suddenly you can understand why, if you followed this down through this graph, you might actually start to go with, oh, maybe I want to boycott the Daily Bugle. Maybe I don't agree with their policies, or something similar. Hopefully that gives you kind of like that taste. Now, obviously that was the ideal. That's what we mocked up on a whiteboard at the beginning of all of this. So what did we actually get? So spoiler alert, there's the graph schema spat out by our Neo4j database. And actually, it's pretty close, I'd say. You can see that we have people, we have them connected to postcodes, we have them controlling companies, we have them citizens of and registered in countries, and then we've got some other controlling entities and a few other relationships. So great, actually, this looks like what we wanted to build. So we were able to do what we wanted to do. We were able to take all of that data and map it into a structure and store it natively so that we could do this. And if you want to see the details of all the code, we're going to go into a little bit now, but there's a GitHub repository where Global Witness actually published a load of the analytics certainly behind things. I warn you now that they didn't, the database, the Neo4j database isn't available just because nobody wanted to get sued. All the data is publicly available, but you'd have to rebuild a load of it yourself if you wanted to actually either turn it into a Neo4j database or do any of the analytics. everything you're going to see from here on in, there's going to be no explicit company names. There'll be one mention of a person, mainly because I haven't done the investigative journalism. So whilst I can find structures and things that maybe look strange to me, I'm not an expert in this space. And I wouldn't want anybody to infer X was doing something inappropriate that they shouldn't be doing. And this was also why Global Witness didn't want to publish their database, even though it was built off public data, because there's a lot of extra work that still has to go into this. So forewarned is forearmed. So here's a quick little video, no audio this time, so we don't have to worry about it, on how easy it is to get started with Neo4j. And I just wanted to share this so that you can actually see, and I'll talk you through as we're going. So I'm literally going to go to Google and ask for the Neo4j sandbox. And first thing up, for me at least, is a link to the Neo4j sandbox. And you can go and play with this. You can launch a free sandbox instance, which lasts for about 3 days. So I'm going to log in with Google. It'll twiddle around. Now you can create a blank one, or you can actually preload it. So I'm going to load up the Panama Papers. If you've heard of the Panama Papers before, that was another piece of investigative journalism which used Neo. They've actually got a public copy of that data set. And so you can see this is slowly spinning itself up. You get a little bit of initializing database. Ho hum. Spin, spin, spin. Okay, now it's installing software, the browser software on top of it. And I promise it doesn't take too long of a time. Now the data set's going in, and we're nearly there. And so around about now-ish. Yeah, there we go. So here's the details. Suddenly you've got, here's actions. You can ask for an extension. You can invite other people. You can get the connection details so that you can log in from your local machine. None of this exists anymore. I've switched this off, so none of this is, don't go try connecting. And then there's examples on connect via drivers. So if you want to see a quick start of how do I now connect to this via JavaScript or Python, they go and give you the tool. So you can literally copy and paste that into your terminal or into your Jupyter notebook, and it will run. Or you can just access things directly from the browser, which is what we're going to do now. And it will load up. And here we go. Let's dismiss the welcome messages and a little bit of briefing that they put in, because this is a preloaded data set. And I'm basically just going to say, go and match, type of there, all the nodes, which we'll just for now label as N. So go and find them, go and return them to me. And then, but actually just limit it to the first 100. And then we're going to run that, and we're going to get back a load of nodes. So I haven't specified what type, but I can now actually double click on one, and it will show what else is connected to it. And it's a different node type. And I can just keep clicking on things and seeing how they connect. And so you can suddenly see how this is actually a really nice exploratory way to find out how things are connected when you have them stored in this kind of network space. And I want to show that because it's really easy for you to get started. There's a community version of Neo4j anyway, so there's a free, I don't work for them, I'm not advertising them in that way. So you can use it for free. You don't have to pay for a commercial license for the light version. They do their enterprise version for making money. But you can also just go and dabble in their sandbox and see if it actually would work for you. And then you've got no install overheads or compute overheads or anything else. And you can see that will happen basically within a matter of like 2 minutes or so. So let me just go on to the next slide. So maximize my screen. So going to the technical to see again how easy it is, let's build our first graph. And what you can see is literally I'm going to take the driver. Here's the username and the password that would have come from those connection details that we just saw. It will connect up. And this is, you might be familiar with something like SQL. So Cypher is the querying language which Neo4j wrote. And what you can hopefully see, so this is basically meant to be saying create a path P. So I'm basically creating a route. So I'm going to set it equal to, and anything with round brackets is a node. So create Andreas, who's a person, and a property we're going to assign to it is give him the name Andreas. And then anything with connected effectively via hyphens to an arrow, so this is a directed relationship, we're going to say he works at Neo, which is a type company node, and we're going to give it the name Neo4j. So this is here, what you're basically getting is this is the unique key, the unique ID, if you like, of the node. And actually, on the other side, we can even carry on writing. We've got another person who, called Michael, who's also going to work there, and it's going to return that path. And then we get a result. We run it. This piece down here just clears the data out. And this effectively is then what we've created, that we have. Ignore this one down here. Pretend it doesn't exist. We have Andreas works at Neo4j and Michael works at Neo4j. And that's how easy it is to get started. And one of the things that I personally like about Cypher is the fact that you can kind of write this down on a whiteboard, and then you can write the query down. That's how they've designed the structuring in some respects of the language. Obviously, there are more complexities when you start getting to matches and constraints and other things, but it's a good starting point. But the other thing that you need to remember is that, as much as one of the things I love about this toolkit is the fact that you can extend a graph as you need to. You don't have to have it all in mind in the beginning. It's also good to try and put structure in when you know there's going to be structure. So, you know, planning helps. So we know, for example, up front that every company, the ID of that company from Companies House can only be used once. So we'll create a constraint on it. We're going to basically say that that's a unique identifier. That stops us accidentally putting duplicate companies in with the same ID. And we can do the similar thing with postcodes and people, countries, so on and so forth. So do that, and then that helps both in stopping us making mistakes as we go forward, but also in it'll help us with our indexing when we come to actually decide what we want to get out of this. So here's another little example. We're going to store the countries in Neo4j because that's going to help anchor us. So I went and looked for an independent list of country codes. So now I've got alternative name, a name, and a country code. So when it comes to looking at what might be a country in any of the fields in the data we get from Companies House, I can actually look for any of those things, but then attach them to a single unique node. So the idea here is that I'm going to build these known geographical countries, which are fixed, and then map everything in, and hopefully therefore minimize, again, duplication. But as we carry on building, things get complicated. So you can see this is the level of information, the detail that's in a lot of those files. You know, fine, you've got company names and company numbers and then addresses, but you've also got the accounts, when the accounts were last actually sent. So if you're trying to keep do regular updates, you might want to, you need to be keeping track of, has this record changed? Is there something new to go and get? What's in my database versus what's just now come out from my latest query from Companies House. Also, one of the interesting ones here is you can actually see the history of the company names. And this is a really good example of where having a fixed tabular schema would get trickier in something like SQL, because you can't just have that unique record of these are all the, you couldn't have a column of the last company name and the company name before the last company name and the company, because you don't know when to stop unless you're going to fix in that I'm only going to record up to 10 changes and then I don't care anymore. Or you're going to have to do really complex and clever joins by maintaining this in a different way. And when you've got lots of data and you start doing lots of joins, that's when SQL databases grind to a halt. Whereas here in the graph, you can imagine of was previously known as this, and then chained back from that was previously known as this. So you can still then keep these histories. So you can, hopefully you're starting to see some of the power of this approach and why we went this way. But also there is still a level of complexity you're getting to. And this is, again, showing you then trying to build this up. On the left-hand side, you've got one of the big chunks for creating new nodes and relationships to connect a load of the data together from one of the big basic company files, giant batches. And you can see we're trying to put a lot of stuff in together. And this was an iterative thing, you know, as we went forward, as I'm sure you've all got experience of doing things, you don't do it quite right the first time. So it was a lesson learned as things did and didn't work. There were many times I had to dump everything out and start building all over again. But equally, as much as there's a lot going on and there's a lot of complexity, I'm hoping from what you're seeing on screen, you know, this is still creating a company with a unique identifier and then adding a load of other other values to it. And the merge is now done in order to update either a record or create a brand new one, i.e. don't ever duplicate anything. So there's a lot of detail going into there, but it's not overtly complex. And then independently, in order to make sure it doesn't get too complicated, I keep track of things that I then I create the relationship separately from creating the individual nodes. Excuse me. So that was the master plan on building, and you know, that's probably the last bit of code you'll see from me right now. You will see the whole thing in action, but complexity and complications and challenges. So the idea is we're trying to go from this thing on the left, which is this murder map, crime map, if you like, idea of, you know, people, as you see in the movies, pinning things on notice boards and trying to figure out the connections, to actually ordering these connections in a stored fashion so that we have a much more, a tighter structure that's accessible. And this is complex because, as I kind of already said, you know, we've got 4 million company records, we've got 4 million beneficial owners, we've got 40 million corporate officers, we've got a disqualified directors list, we have worldwide politician data, we've got another 40 million corporate, there's the same 40 million corporate officers. We've got a lot of financial secrecy jurisdiction data. So there's a lot of stuff to layer in, and equally when you're layering this stuff in, you want to do it in such a way that you can get out the information you want. The whole point of this project is to not be searching for a needle in a stack of needles. It's to really be able to go in and go with, there's a company there, and there's a company over here, and I want to see if there's a relationship or connections between them. Go find it. So for example, because of the way we set it up, there would almost always be a relationship, because usually there'd be quite a quick connection to the UK between those companies. So then when you're querying it, you've got to be prepared to go with, make sure to ignore country level geographical similarities. Don't go via those nodes. Those routes are not available to you. Because it's not very meaningful. That's not what you're looking for. You want to know with, are these connected in any way via people or via a specific address, because, you know, companies being registered at exactly the same physical address can lead to things. And this is the that example of the name that I can mention. You can't actually read this slide particularly, the image very well, unfortunately. So one of the big problems that we identified early on in the project, and it's something that we kind of didn't have an overall solution for. We have ideas for it, but fundamentally the biggest problem is, if you go to register a company in the UK today, you are not required to provide any identity documents if you register it yourself directly with Companies House. And even if you register it with a third party who would have to check your ID, they don't have to file that ID, I don't believe, with Companies House. So what you're actually seeing on in this slide is the UK corporate ownership structure of Donald Trump. But all 4 of those people, and circled by that red ring, are Donald Trump. One of these will be Donald Trump Jr., one of them will be Donald J. Trump, one of them will be Donald John Trump, another one's probably Donald John Trump Jr. Well, no, sorry, it's not. You've got Junior in there as well. It's separate. Donald J. Trump, Donald John Trump, and Donald Trump, certainly. I can't remember what the 4th one was. And effectively, we think that, you know, they are probably the same person, and they're probably the same person in part because they're connected via quite quickly between other Trumps. And, you know, Ivanka Trump is over here somewhere, and she will have a connection via a company to 2 of these Donald Trumps. So this is actually an issue in that if you go searching in the Companies House database, you'll very quickly realize that the same name, which is probably the same person, exists multiple times with multiple sets of records, because there's no easy way to merge those. We had an idea that perhaps you could combine similarities in name and month and year of birth, because you don't get the full birth date, to some of these graph structures. But that was very much an enrichment, and we identified the problem, but we didn't solve it. But if you go into this space, this is a known general problem of data on this sort of labeling is never usually perfectly clean. So you've got to do some kind of fuzzy logic to suddenly collapse it back down. And in some places it'll be easier. Some people will have very unique names, but, you know, if you go looking for John Smith in the UK, is that really there? You know, there are lots of John Smiths. But some of those John Smiths are likely to still be the same John Smith, but you're gonna struggle. If you went to the Netherlands, for example, and register a company, there you have to provide ID and it gets filed. So therefore you now have a record of, social security number or equivalent. And so therefore you now got a unique ID for something. And so therefore it's possible to make sure that you know that what that one person is the same as this other person. And this is now a little video to try and compare the system that we built with the system that exists if you go to use Companies House. So what we're seeing here is a search through Companies House's database online through their portal of Cambridge Analytica. And we're just going hunting and seeing what we can find. And we're finding that the people with significant control, oh, we've got a company, SCL Elections. So let's go looking for them. It's not particularly interesting. So who's controlling this? Oh, it's another company. You're starting to see this whole shell company. There's another company that's gone up the level. So let's see, we've gone up here. Oh, have we got to people yet? Yes. Okay, so that name, because I've read the news, happened to sound interesting. So let me go checking for them. Oh, that didn't work. I think it's because I've got a Mr. there, so we'll take the Mr. off. And now you can see actually those first two records have exactly the same name. And this first one only had 2 companies associated with it. One of them was SCL, but this one has much more, including Cambridge Analytica. So, oh, there's a lot of stuff he's connected to, including Data. I heard of them. They're a data analytics company. That's intriguing. So those of you who don't know, Cambridge Analytica got wound up, but it turned out that a lot of the people who founded Cambridge Analytica about a month or 2 before they wound it up had established a new company called Data, which also did data analytics. And I'm not saying that anything's wrong there. They're all legitimately allowed to do this sort of thing, but whether they do similar work to what Cambridge Analytica was doing, I don't know. But if you went to our database, our engine, what would happen if you went looking for Cambridge Analytica and Data? So, I've got my journalist who wants to know, is there a connection between these 2 companies for whatever tip or reason they've gone to do it? So we'll just query. And this is hunting now through all of that data, all the 100 million plus nodes and relationships that we've got in there. And let's go locking this down a little bit more. And let's actually return the nodes, not just the names this time. So it'll hunt through again. And hopefully it should pop up with a couple of nodes. There they are. And as I kind of showed you before, you can start expanding on these things. So I can just start clicking on, well, what's the relationships, and expand this. And there you go. See, this is a problem. They're both registered in the UK, so there's a connection there. But I don't really want to keep that connection. So I've expanded a load of stuff out and I delete it. And ooh, there's definitely common companies linking those 2 people together. So there's definitely links between those companies. So you can understand that suddenly that might be a point where you would start to explore potentially other things. So that's all great. And that was kind of the root and the foundation of what we wanted to get done. But the point of it is to then extract information, to get insight. And so there's lots of different analytics and querying and things you can do. And I'm not going to bore you with the code or the statistics done on getting things out, but I'm going to tell you what came out. So 4.1 million companies are now on the beneficial ownership register. Now, we knew that going in because that was the number of records. It's kind of important though, because one of the arguments other countries have made against making this sort of register is that people won't be able to fill it in. It's too complicated, it's too difficult. And what you end up finding is that actually, you know what, everybody did it because they had to. And of those that did, something like 80%, possibly more, registered people who were controlling them. So they managed to successfully go and get records. Now, that's not to say that the others failed. If you're Tesco, for example, you're traded publicly on the stock market. There may well not be anybody who has more than 25% single shareholding in Tesco. So there are plenty of companies out there who don't have people who meet the definition, the legal definition of person of significant control. And this is then another area on policy as to where should you set that threshold for actually doing this sort of stuff. But that's a different debate and something that I'm not very informed on, so I can't really talk to you about. Easy thing that we found out, 4,000 owners in our database were under the age of 2 at the time. So there are toddlers who are meant to be running companies. Now, maybe that's possibly true in some places. Maybe somebody's kind of inherited a controlling stake or something. I don't know, maybe. But considering one of them isn't due to be born until 2021, I'd say someone's not doing a very good job of entering data or auditing data. And this is one of the pieces of feedback we gave to Companies House, is that if you're letting people self-register on your online portal, should you be allowing them to register their date of birth as something in the future? Should you be alerting that this person is under the age of 16 or 18 or whatever the legal requirement would generally be, and therefore challenging the stuff? At the moment, they don't do any data auditing or compliance. They allow you to pretty much put anything you want in. And hence there are rumors that go around that when you're setting up your company, or your solicitor's setting up your company, in certain places they may accidentally have typos. And this is facilitated by a lot of the things in there were free text boxes. Anecdotally, for example, I think when we did an early analysis, we found 500 different spellings of British for nationality. At one level, there was British spelt with 2 T's. Okay, maybe it's a typo, but maybe it's an on-purpose typo so that you're kind of hiding some stuff. Somebody declared it that they were a citizen of Cornwall, which, as much as I love Cornwall, I don't think it's an independent nation state. And this was, again, feedback that we gave to Companies House, and they actually changed that. So if you go try and register a company today, I think you'll find that you actually have a drop-down menu. You don't have a free text box anymore. But more interestingly, what you start finding actually is circular control structures. These are completely illegal in the system. And there were like 328 that we found. Some of them are probably fine in that it's like a hairdresser has reported that their own company controls their own company. And that's probably a misunderstanding. But equally, that means that an impact is that Companies House needs to do a better job of explaining and educating the people to fill in these forms correctly. But other examples are, and I'm not joking, there was a company that had company name 1 controlling company name 2, controlling company name 3, controlling company name 4, controlling company name 1. You had a complete circle. There was nowhere where apparently it stopped. And that obviously can't legally exist in any sensible structure. And so those, I believe, led to Companies House and others actually investigating and challenging those ownership structures. 5 beneficial owners control more than 6,000 companies, which then starts raising the question of, are those individuals just holding companies for people? Are they, I mean, it might be fine. You might be a company factory that you pre-set up companies and then you sell them on. There's nothing illegal about that. But equally, you might want to keep track of those because there's somebody buying a company like that because they're trying to hide who originally founded it. And one of the key things was in being able to do all of this, it fundamentally demonstrated the value and potential of these open and public registers of company ownership, because these were things being found by us and Global Witness. These weren't things being found by our government or by Companies House until we told them to go looking for it. Even though they had the data, they hadn't gone and tried to do this work. There was some, I mean, so the companies we keep is actually the name of the report, and there's a link at the end of the presentation, and you feel free to go and have a look at some of the stuff because I can't cover all of the details. But there's some interesting things in there if you're interested in these things. But there was definitely some serious money laundering risks identified in the UK. 345 companies have an owner who's a disqualified director. Again, it's not being automatically caught. 390 companies have company officers or owners who are politicians. Now, that's not illegal, but you might want to be concerned about checking whether they have conflicts of interest on things that they're supporting in Parliament versus their own financial holdings. 7,848 companies share an owner or an officer or registered postcode with a company suspected of having been involved in money laundering. Again, red flag should be going off. And there was one address, which had 1,099 companies declared at, which weren't reporting that there was a person of significant control. That's really, really sort of more than you would certainly expect. And 761 companies with 1 director with 2 convictions for fraud and tax evasion. And and these were the things that we basically found, I think, in the first year of this work. Social impacts, a load of this ended up, you may have even read about it. We have this enabled or contributed towards a number of pieces of investigative journalism. So this work ended up in Wall Street Journal, BBC, iPlayer, Radio File on 4 did a piece that used some of this evidence. The Guardian. There was what blew me away is that on the left you can actually see a cut down summary from Hansard, which is the minutes effectively of debates in the Houses of Parliament, and a load of the Global Witness work enabled by a load of this analysis ended up in debates in the House of Lords on the new sanctions and anti-money laundering bill. So fundamentally it's informed and potentially influenced legislation in this country. It has certainly done so in the sense that there's been a crackdown on Scottish limited partnerships and the UK doing a U-turn on whether it was going to require the UK overseas territories to actually also have open ownership registers. With regards to the Scottish limited partnerships, they used to be a way of, you really didn't have to report who controlled you. And there's an interesting fact, I think something like, if you look at the fraction of SLPs that had a connection back to a former Soviet country, it was something like 40% of them, relative to something like 0.1% or 0.4% of regular public limited companies in England and Wales. And when this register sort of got created, which was around here, when you had to start declaring these things, and that included SLPs, suddenly everybody stopped incorporating them. And people have been warning that these were ways that you could hide fraudulent activity and facilitated things. So that's absolutely amazing that that's happened. The impact for Global Witness as an organization, I should say, and that's one of the key things that DataKind's always been about. It's about empowering those organizations. It's not to make them beholden to DataKind or to volunteers. It's to let them see the value of things so that they can, where possible, make investments and do things themselves. So they gained increased use of data science tools and their own data awareness. Then following this, they actually increased investment in staff and technology. So they took on a part-time DevOps person to maintain cloud compute and to support this activity. And then they started hiring data journalists and junior data scientists to support Sam in his work. And they also completely bought into what we were doing about the idea of open sourcing the code for reproducibility, which is why they've got their GitHub and they're sharing that stuff. And actually, if you go into their repository, you'll find updates they've run since on new releases of the data. And they've done this analysis in other countries, although I think those aren't necessarily open registers where they've had to pay for that data. But they have taken this knowledge and this insight from the work that we did over a year and completely built upon it, and they've taken it to heart inside their organization. And so closing remarks, you might think it's a little bit trite, but I think this quote kind of sums it up for this sort of volunteer work. Like I said, we were a team of 4 people, 4 pure volunteers. So I would say never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And I'm quite proud to say that I think in this instance, we made our own little mark in the world, but I'm incredibly proud of the work we did. And in fact, we were nominated and shortlisted for a DATSI award the other year for this project for the best use of data science to achieve social impact. We didn't win, we were robbed, but it was great to be shortlisted. So thank you. There's a few links here to the reports, and I think there's the YouTube video that I mentioned before. If you're curious about DataKind, I'm happy to answer questions now, but you can also contact them directly. You can find them on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to me, and feel free to ask me any questions in whichever time slot is available to everybody left. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, we've got an anonymous attendee. Maybe I need to start doing an analysis of the people who are in the call. Hi, I was wondering how data from officers and owners have been used differently in the graphs. Did you use both the data sets or just owners' data? So we try to splice together as much of the data as possible, so it kind of existed in a single graph. So you can imagine potentially that an officer might actually already be an owner. And like I said, this is partially where that problem of non-unique identifiers for people comes in. But we attempted to create a unique identifier by taking basically first name, middle name, your full set of names joined together with the month of birth and year of birth, And if you consistently logged that, therefore in these records, you would get identified as the same person. There is the potential that could still merge people who shouldn't be, but it was the best we could do in the constraints that we had. But yeah, so we basically pulled all of that in and then we layered it on together. The one piece of work where we didn't actually directly join it was, as you saw in the how to get started Neo4j little video that I showed. It had the Panama Papers data set. And obviously there's a lot of interesting stuff about corruption and ownership there. And Sam from Global Witness actually had a go at looking for things in the UK and then looking for interesting things in the Panama one. And you could have, in theory, imported that data and then tried to reconnect up if you could unify those data sets. But we didn't go all that way. Hopefully that answers your question. Jennifer, How24K sounds like a great company to work for. How did you find them? And do you have any tips on other data scientists looking for similarly socially impactful jobs? So I should say that this work was all done in my spare time. If you're thinking that this was me doing my day job, this was me volunteering for DataKind. So this was me finding 4 hours out of my own time a week. But I would also say How24K is a great company to come and work for. But I should say it is for profit, although the idea is that we do see the vision as making cities and infrastructure smarter is going to benefit everyone, as well as allow us to make turn some profit in the process. I found them because one of the co-founders is a very, very, very good friend of mine. And he and I worked as researchers in Stanford together at the same time. And after a couple of years later, were both basically leaving academia. He left a little bit before me. He co-founded the company, and he knew that I was the person he wanted and trusted to take on to start the data science side of what the company was doing. So it was a bit of, it was who I knew as much as what I knew. The one that helped to inform the other. But the other way is, so one of the other great things, again, with something like DataKind, is it's a great community. So we have a Slack group that any volunteer or anybody who is interested can effectively sign up to. And you'll often still have people who are, because you have people who are working at socially responsible organizations, as well as people who are just volunteering their time. When people need to hire or there's opportunities going, then it gets advertised in that space. So that's one way to pick those sorts of things up. So Hubert, very interesting to see your work. We're currently investigating ownership of the nurseries inspected by Ofsted. We try to obtain the basic financial information like assets or cash in the bank. Have you considered those fields available in the company's house? So no, at the time of the project, we didn't get that far. Again, like I say, I don't know if Global Witness has extended it, because this is one of the joys was we saw that it was very easy to extend and add stuff in afterwards. That once you built that foundation, it was very easy to extend it. One of the things that happened the other year that it's a side project, if ever I had enough spare time, that I'd love to go back and visit, is that they've released company ownership of land in the UK. So now, in theory, you can not just track who owns the companies, you can actually understand what property and what land ownership across the UK, since a large fraction of the UK land is in private owners' hands, you can actually do those connections. So that was something, so yeah, so for the project, we didn't explicitly do that, but it would have been relatively straightforward with the appropriate data to actually start linking that stuff back together. You mentioned the project took a year. What were the resource inputs overall? What do you think it would take to scale up this kind of work? So like I say, it took a year, but it took a year from the fact that you had, so other than Sam, who worked for Global Witness, and this still wasn't 100% his job to work on this project, Giselle, Heiko, Robin and myself, we're volunteers. So we all had day jobs, we all had other commitments. So the goal when volunteering on a data core is the fact that it is on average 4 hours a week. But for example, so I think it was something like 11 months we ran for, but that included like, I think I remember we started in like July of a year. And then basically in the course of August, at any given time, half the team were on vacation or something. And so we didn't get a lot of work done, because even though we would try and do 4 hours a week. You know, it just didn't get started until September. And then equally you had a Christmas period, which also ate into time. So I've never actually gone back and tried to figure out quite how much resource we put into it. I think if you'd put us working on it full time and you'd had the whole team doing it, I mean, you're going from what we're doing 4 hours a week. So that's equivalent of 2 working days a month. So that's what, 24, that's 24 working days in the course of a year. So in theory, in 5 weeks, working flat out full time on it. And if anything, doing it in that way, you'd probably get to the result a little bit faster, just because obviously as you're trying to pick things up and put things down, and, you know, we were having like a weekly meeting to check status updates. So we spent a lot of time in meetings for the little bits of updates that we were going through and our plans for going forward, and that would condense down. So I think at a basic level, to rebuild that from something else, you could probably do, you know, if you had 2 months and you had a team of 3 or 4 people working on it, you'd actually have something at least as comparable to what we had. And I do know that there are private entities who have done something similar. I was actually at a Neo4j conference before lockdown started in London, and this exact piece of work was effectively presented, but from a due diligence investment tool for another group. So I ended up chatting to the person over coffee afterwards, and they went, "Oh yeah, no, we had that problem, but we also had this data that we've layered in." So, you know, there's lots of power to extend it. There's lots of things you can do with it. One of the funny things that I discovered towards the end of the project was actually Companies House, the government is exempt from GDPR, bizarrely, or at least Companies Houses. So the fact that there's a load of personal data in here, like names and addresses, is fine. The second you download that data, certainly when you then go and put it in a database, you now have to be GDPR compliant where they didn't have to be. So there is some things to be considered potentially in that space when you've potentially got people's personal data. So at a management level, but I think, like I say, I think it's completely feasible to scale this. I can, when I presented an early version of this, someone did ask me in the Q&A actually, do you have any plans to commercialize this? Because I could really use a tool like that. And, you know, it's kind of one of those things sat at the back of my head of, well, yeah, I know how to build this, so I could do that, but it's not something that I've gone and done. Hopefully that answers your question. Is Global Witness now analyzing changes in ownership structure? If so, how frequently are they updating the graph based on the snapshots? So I know that they've done updates. I think, and I could be wrong, that they're doing what is the status of the ownership structure today. So they'll go in, they'll take the latest full data download at the time they want to do their analysis. I know that they kind of did this like certainly 1 year after the initial project release and the initial report went out. But I don't think they are maintaining a history evolving through. So I don't think that they are looking for changes to the graph. I'm really curious about it because it's something I've thought about, but it is another level of complexity of how you put a time slicing effectively into that graph that you can detect changes over time versus just updating it and not storing the history. It's a really interesting thing. I don't think they're doing it. I'd be really interested to see what anybody managed to come up with on that stuff because, like I say, I think it could be quite cool. But I think there'll certainly be challenges in figuring out how to do that sensibly, to put that structure in place, and then how to analyze it and maintain it. Maria, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. You mentioned the graph isn't currently publicly available. If someone wanted to try doing analysis on the data but did not want to construct the whole graph, it is quite big. You're quite right, it is. Are there meaningful subgraphs that one could consider without potentially missing a big part of the picture? So you might have seen on one of the screenshots I had of the actual PSC data. So you can of course go and access the API. So if there's specific things that you were interested in, you could just start crawling the graph out from given known points that you wanted to. And you could go and try and get, okay, well, I've got a company, now go give me all the directors, give me all the PSCs. And then for each one of those, if you wanted to, you could go and query and pull. And so you could extend it out that way if you wanted to do it, building a graph up that way. Equally, you could go and get a starting point of just getting one of the sub snapshots. And I mean, to be honest, if you started from the 4 million, just the beneficial owner data, which is like 4 million companies and about 4 million people, it only takes actually I can't remember how long. I mean, we weren't overpowering it, but it's in a matter of hours to build that graph once you've actually written the code to loop through the data to actually put it in place. And then, of course, you can query it at your leisure. So the place where it's obviously starts getting more complex is when you're starting to throw in all of if you're trying to put in the politician data and you're trying to also splice in all of those other things. So I wouldn't necessarily be put off by the fact that it sounds large. It is manageable, but you could also cut that down if you know you've got a targeted place where you only want to go and get a subset of stuff out. Equally, the trick is, and we didn't get to this point, and I'm hoping Global Witness one day comes back and we get and we do another project, whether at a data dive or an event. We didn't try doing sort of like any deep learning on graph structure technology to go and look for, does this look like a suspicious structure of places where we know that actually that company was associated with money laundering. So can we learn something about how it looks structurally that we could go and find equivalent things? And if you wanted to do that, then you probably want a large, if not all of the graph, because you want to make sure that you're actually capturing structure properly. Hope that answers the question.